My writing process, um, it feels like it's different for each book because where I get my ideas from tends to change with each book. I know with my latest novel, Concrete Rose, that came about because so many of my readers fell in love with Maverick and The Hate U Give, and they would ask me so many questions about this character. And in answering their questions, I started coming up with a story in my head. And I decided, you know what? Instead of me just telling people all the time about Maverick, why don't I show them Maverick? Show them how he became the man and the father we see in The Hate U Give. Why don't I write his story? And his story came about almost organically. It blossomed, which is funny, ironic, Concrete Rose. But it did. It just blossomed out of the concrete. And it came together quickly for me. And I started with Maverick and I ended with Maverick. The entire process did. And I had to ask myself, who is he at the beginning of the story and who do I want him to be at the end? But those are the two questions I usually ask with anything that I'm starting. I have to ask, who is this character at the beginning and who are they going to be at the end? And then how do I get them to that end point? So that's how my process really kicks off. And then from there, I try to create their world. And then I ask myself a few more questions. How do they view the world? How does the world view them? But more importantly, how do they wish that the world viewed them? Because the way the world sees us and the way we wish that the world saw us can be two totally different things. So I think that's a key question for me as an author when creating stories. And then in creating, asking those things and creating, their world, I have to ask us, okay, so who are the people who make up this world? What does this world look like? How does this world affect their decisions? Um, and from there, I take a lot of notes. I'm a firm believer in outlining before I write. I used to try to write without an outline, but for me, it was like, driving to an unfamiliar place without a GPS. I couldn't do it. So I outline now and I figure things out, but I never make myself just stick to the outline because going back to that GPS metaphor, there are times where when you're driving somewhere and you're kind of familiar with the place, you kind of know the place a little bit, but you're still using your GPS. But the GPS tells you go this way, but you know from memory or something that if I go this way, it saves me a little bit more time. So I'm going to make this turn here. That's what I do as a writer. There are times where I drift away from the GPS or the outline and I make a turn here that I wasn't expecting to make, but it makes a little bit more sense. So I never married myself to my outline. We're just in a mutual relationship. But I try to follow it for the big points, the big plot points, the important things. And then from there, I do a messy draft, a messy first draft. My biggest piece of advice to aspiring writers is allow yourself to be imperfect. Perfection is the enemy of progress. That first draft especially needs to be horrible. It has to be, it's going to be. Every book you've ever read started out badly. The great thing about writing is there's a thing called editing, revising. And so I write a messy first draft that maybe makes no sense to anyone. I actually call it my zero draft. And then from there, I do a first draft and I edit and I get to know these characters a bit more. And then I do another draft, however many drafts it takes. So my process, it has a general path, I guess you could say, but each book has its own little twists and turns that it takes. So like right now I'm working on a book and it's different from anything I've written so far. So my journey with my process with writing it has been a little bit different. But in the end, they all end up the same way. Hopefully, it's turning into something that makes sense to people. That's the main thing for me.
This author interview was produced through a partnership of the National Education Association and WETA. For more author interviews, please visit adlit.org